Hello and welcome to the Bears and Lions podcast. This is the podcast where we challenge our present by viewing our past. I'm a firm believer that our greatest future lies within the correct view of our past, because when you actually look at it, you're going to see that, yeah, there were some things in your past that you probably are comparing to others, like, oh, they never went through this. But that comparison is actually something that's going to make your future a little bit brighter. In this conversation, that's exactly what I'm going to break down, is comparison and actually the value of comparison in today's society. I hope that you will enjoy this conversation, be challenged by this conversation, and I'll see you on the other side. So I want to talk to you about comparison. Comparison is something in the social media world and even in society today that a lot of people are trying to avoid it. They're afraid of it. They want to get rid of it in a lot of ways. Is stop comparing yourself to others and don't compare. Compare is not good and compare is toxic. I've heard toxic. I just want to go on record here. I reject all of that. All of it. No, I think comparison is great. And the reason why I think comparison is great is because I grew up in the time before the dinosaurs when there was the dollar menu at McDonald's or the dollar menu at Wendy's. And you say, well, what does that have to do with comparison? It's because if I had $5 to spend and I was comparing what I could get with $5 at McDonald's, I could get a Big Mac, or I could get 2 McChicken sandwiches, 1 small fry, and a tea cup, which was larger than like the normal size cups, but I could get all of that for $5. I loved that. I could compare what the value that I had in my hand. I could compare what I could get with it. And it kind of helped determine what that choice was. I remember when the Crunchwrap Supreme came out, and this is literally life-changing to me when the Crunchwrap Supreme came out. And it probably was life-changing to you. You just don't know about it. But the Crunchwrap Supreme came out and it was like $3.50, $4, something like that for 1 Crunchwrap Supreme. And I remember I used to calculate, okay, I can get 3 burritos or 1 Crunchwrap Supreme. And I loved Crunchwrap Supreme. So I was like, okay, how do I do this? So maybe $5, I would be like, okay, I'm going to get 1 Crunchwrap Supreme and 1 soft taco, because that was like 89 cents at the time. And so I would compare what I had based on the value of the money that I had and based on the value I put on how much food I was going to eat or what I wanted. We do this all the time, by the way. We do this all the time with comparison in all other avenues of our lives. We compare what food we want to eat, right? I want Jimmy John's. No, I want Jersey Mike's. Well, which one do you love? Well, I'm going to compare the two and determine I would rather go to Jimmy John's or I would rather go to Jersey Mike's, right? People do this all the time. What do you want to eat? Chipotle. Well, I had Chipotle the other day. What else is there? Chick-fil-A. Maybe we go to Chick-fil-A. Well, comparing the two, I'd rather go to Chipotle. Okay, then we go to Chipotle. And why? Because I like the food, I like the portions, et cetera, for the money that I spend. We love comparison. Back in the day, when I first got my first cell phone bill, it literally said, would you like to compare the plans? And I would look at the most expensive. This is long before we had unlimited talk and text all the time. The highest expensive plan was unlimited, but that was like very expensive. And then if you weren't talking and texting a lot, you would get the minimum amount of minutes. You wouldn't talk very much during the day, and you would wait until after 9 p.m. When talk was free. Texting still costs, though. I still remember getting a big bill because I texted more than I anticipated, which is wild to think about nowadays because we all talk and text like way, way more. So I share all this because comparison is beneficial when you look at it that way. And I've seen all these people who are like, oh, comparison is bad. Comparison, don't compare yourself to others because of X, Y, and Z, and you shouldn't compare others, and that's not right. It's just confusing. I was talking with my friend Abil earlier today, and comparison came up, and he said something just profound. I loved it. He said, I know people say comparison is the thief of joy, but I also think that it's the catalyst to change. Now, he even admitted he didn't know if he came up with that or if somebody else did or if somebody else has said something like it, but he just said that's what he kind of views comparison for. And I loved it. I absolutely love that. It is the catalyst of change. It causes us to decide, you know what, maybe things need to be different. And I started thinking of comparison from the standpoint of like, well, what about like American Idol? When you would compare the contestants, right? You would compare which contestant sang better, right? Hopefully you would want the contestant that sings the best to win. Not everybody's going to be Carrie Underwood, but we would listen to those first weeks, the auditions, where it's like you could compare. That guy can sing, that guy can't, right? But it doesn't mean that that other guy has no value or that other guy can't learn how to sing. A lot of times it was like, you can get better. Sometimes you would get the contestant that would come back like a year or two later, and they would be way better than before because they had voice lessons. They put in the work, they put in the time, they put in the effort. And I feel like everyone wants to find value in themselves, right? So they don't want to compare themselves to others because they want just value intrinsically, but they have that. But there's a value that they have to understand when comparing about the value that they're placing on themselves. That comparison helps us understand there is work that can be done to get better, to be the people that we want to be. And if we want to be a world-class musician, then we have to practice like a world-class musician. And we have to put in that time that the world-class musician put in to get there. It's not saying that there isn't value in people. What I think a lot of people are confused about comparison is they say, well, if I am not compared with this person, then I don't have the same value of that, or I have no value. And that's just not true. People are starting to put a value on themselves that's not accurate to who they are. And that doesn't mean that there's no value. It just means that they need to be realistic, or they need to have a culture shock or be, brought to. That's what Simon Cowell used to always do on American Idol, right? That was absolutely dreadful. People would be like, oh, what? What are you talking about? I'm great at singing. Everybody says I'm great at singing. And he would be like that shock of, no, you're actually not. You have a lot of work to do. And that's, I think it's valuable, because if we never had comparison, we would never have players like Kobe Bryant or LeBron James, or the people who had the ability, who would compare themselves to others and say, I need to be better. I want to be better. I want to be the best. So they compared themselves to the best. And then they said, am I there yet? No, I'm going to get better. And then they start comparing themselves to themselves and say, hey, can I be better? It's one of the reasons why LeBron James is still wrecking the NBA in year like 22, 20, 21. Like, he's been in the league for forever, and he's still putting up 20 points a game. The man is a monster, but he's not comparing himself to, I want to be this. He's comparing himself to himself. Okay, last year I was able to do this. This year I want to be able to do this. There's always going to be a comparison. And then when he started, he was comparing himself to other things. Same thing with Kobe. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. If you want to connect with me further, you can find me on my social media. I'm most active on X, which is formerly known as Twitter, at Kyle Vaught. That's KYLEV as in Victor, ATT. But I'm also trying to become a little bit more active on Instagram and Threads, which is at Kyle_Vaught. So shoot me a follow, shoot me a message, say hi, or maybe there's a topic that you want me to discuss on a future podcast episode. Either way, I cannot wait to get connected. Now let's get back to the conversation. I thought it was interesting. There was a study that was done, and researchers took 3 groups of scholars, separated them so they weren't all together, and they did a very interesting study on how value is placed. And one group, they said, we have a 20,000 entry dictionary. However, the cover is torn. And they asked the first group. They didn't show them the book. They just described it. Said, we have a 20,000 entry dictionary with a torn cover. How much would you pay for it? And they kind of discussed, and they said, you know what? We'll pay $20 for that. And then another group, they described this book, and they said, hey, we have a 10,000 entry dictionary, and the cover is all together, no tears or anything. How much would you pay for this? And they didn't show them the book. They just described it and said, how much would you pay for that? Based on what you would assume the value is. And they discussed, and they said, okay, we'll pay $24 for a 10,000 entry dictionary with an intact cover. So what they found was between the two, each group proceeded to provide a number, a base value of what they thought this should be, just based on word, which is interesting because the 20,000 entry dictionary, which would have more entries, which means more information, which means higher value normally, they only gave $20. They didn't know what to do. So they asked a third group and they compared, they gave the group, this third group, they gave both books and they said, please compare these books side by side and then determine how much you would pay for each. So they compared both side by side and the third group determined the 10,000 entry book with intact cover was only worth $19, while the 20,000 entry dictionary with a torn cover was worth $27. They'd paid $27 for it because they were able to compare and see that the value is there. And the reason why I thought that study was interesting is because innately, as humans, we don't necessarily know how to value something. We don't know how to put value on something unless we compare. That's literally how money works, right? Is I value this amount of money for this task, so I'm going to compare the two, and I'm going to say, yeah, I'll give you $100 to change my oil and wipers and do this because I don't want to do that myself, or I don't know how to do it myself. So it's going to be this value. I will pay this much money for this service. Uber Eats and DoorDash is crazy good at this because they're like, okay, I wonder how much people value the ability to sit at home where we could charge $40 total. They'll buy an order for like $40 and they don't have to go anywhere, but they can get a meal brought to them for $40. And that same meal, they could drive somewhere, take 15 to 30 minutes to drive somewhere, pick up an order, drive home, and they'd pay maybe $20, maybe even less, depending on where it is. Maybe a little bit more as well. But it's like they've determined there is a comparison, a cost comparison of knowing what people will value based on that comparison. So when I say I reject the idea of toxic comparison and things like that, I reject the idea that I shouldn't compare myself to others. I should absolutely compare myself to others. If I want to be a world-class athlete, I need to compare myself to the world-class athlete and say, am I there? No, I'm nowhere close. I have so much work to do, and then I need to get to work and get better. What a lot of people are doing is they're saying, I am of the same value of the world-class athlete, but they haven't put in the work. They haven't done the world-class athletics. They haven't reached that goal, or they haven't reached that height or reached that ability to do those things. You have people out there who are saying, I am a high value person just by walking. I literally have seen TikToks where women have said, just me being at the date with you is me bringing value to the table. That scares me, because if that's the only value of they perceive themselves as that valuable, then when they get into a room of high value people, whether it's women, men, whatever, there's a different comparison of like, oh, they haven't done this, this, and this. Now, again, I'm not trying to crack down and say that people are, that they should think of themselves a certain way or that they shouldn't think of themselves a certain way. I want people to understand that they have innate value. You have innate value. I have innate value just in myself as a human. Human beings are valued, and they should be valued. They should be very preciously valued. However, there is a level of value that needs to be understood, is that if you want to be valued as a CEO of a company and you are currently a CEO of a lemonade stand, there's a different level of value where the CEO of the company, maybe it's a Fortune 500 company, has put in years and years and years in a lemonade stand, years and years and years of work as a manager, years and years and years developing a business to get to the point where they're at Elon Musk level or whatever. That's why all the people that like crack down on Elon Musk, I'm like, I don't understand. The man has literally poured in blood, sweat, and tears into this job and into his life. And it's hard to be there. Like, you don't want to compare yourself to Elon Musk, because Elon even said in a podcast recently, people think they want to be me, but they don't want to be me. Like, the stress and anxiety, everything that he deals with, I don't think they would be able to handle it. And I think he's right. But if you want to place an intrinsic value on you and then say, don't compare, comparison's the thief of joy. I'm not going to compare myself to anybody. I'm just me and I am this value. Then there's no way to actually place that value, because you end up becoming much like that book that they didn't know what it looked like. They didn't know what to compare it to. So they may say, yeah, you're only worth $20, because they don't know what to compare you by. But the more you do in life and the more you compare yourself to others and the more you say, I want to be this good at writing. And so you practice writing. I want to be this good at singing. So you practice singing and you take voice lessons. I want to be this good at sales. So you do cold calls and you get better at sales and you practice sales. You find yourself being able to compare. What did the good people do? What did the people who are really good at this do to get there? And then you redo that. You do that based on the comparison. And if you're missing something that somebody else has and you want it, it's a good indicator that you can compare and say, you know what? They've done this. I need to do this to get there. Now, there's always going to be situations where people are handed something out of nowhere, or somebody knows somebody. And so the comparison is skewed. It's a very, 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 very small amount of people. So I really hope that as you go through life and as you go through decisions, that you'll compare and value that comparison. Next time you go out to eat, I want you to think of comparisons and value the fact that comparisons are super good and beneficial. And there is such a strong value in being able to compare what you eat, what you do, what you pay for, what you decide, how you choose to live your life. So compare, be healthy in it, understand that it will be a catalyst to change. It will challenge you to do something new. It'll challenge you to do something more. That's going to do it for this conversation. I know I kind of ranted a little bit, but I do hope that you will walk away with a thought of, you know what, maybe I do need to compare myself to others because they have something that I don't, and I need to work to earn that thing that they have as well. I hope all of you have a wonderful weekend. Remember to give grace, show love, and as always, stay stellar. Peace.